Welcome to Constitutional Defenders, where we discuss important issues and cases related to criminal defense and how criminal defense attorneys handle these cases on a daily basis. Today, we'll be discussing the case of Dennis Tomasik, a man who spent 9 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. His wife, Kim Tomasik, is with us today to tell her story and explain all that she did to help get him exonerated. Welcome to Episode 1. Hi, I'm Lizzy Cary. I am a paralegal with Chartier and Nyamfukudza. I am the producer of this podcast, as well as a paralegal. So paralegal by day, producer by night, which is just a fancy way to say that I'm the only one who knows how to work the equipment. And with us today, we have our hosts of the show, Mary Chartier and Takura Nyamfukudza, who are the partners of our law firm. Hi, Mary. Hi, T.
Hi, Lizzy.
Hey, Lizzy.
And then we also have one of the other paralegals of our firm, Kim Barrus.
Hi, Lizzy.
Hi, Kim. And Mary, what do we have today to talk about?
Well, we're really excited for our guest today. We have Kim Tomasik. Kim's husband was accused of criminal sexual conduct in 2006. He was wrongfully convicted and spent 9 years in prison. Ultimately, it would take 11 years before we exonerated Dennis. And so we're here today to talk to Kim about her experiences in assisting and exonerating her husband, who is now listed on the National Registry of Exonerations.
Nice. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's lovely to have you here.
So before we get started with Kim, we have so many questions for you, and I know our listeners do as well. But in 2006, Dennis was falsely accused by a teenager from the neighborhood of rape. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And that must have rocked your world when those allegations first came out.
Oh, absolutely. We had no clue where it was coming from, or we were just dumbfounded. Totally dumbfounded. I don't even know how to explain it other than what is going on.
And then you and Dennis had never been in trouble before. So you really thought the police would investigate, find there's no merit to this, and then it would all go away.
Absolutely.
And then that's not what happened at all, right?
No, we learned firsthand that that's not how it goes. So
Dennis, he went in to talk to the police and told him that he did not commit these assaults, correct?
Absolutely.
And then what happened?
The prosecutor was running for judge at the time, so we kept getting court dates. Nothing seemed to really be happening. So we just figured that they were investigating and that, it was just going to go away. Like they would find the truth and it would be over.
So Dennis went in, spoke to the police, said that he did not commit these offenses. Ultimately, he was charged, correct?
Yes.
And then how did you find a lawyer?
Well, we never had any legal issues, so we actually found one in a phone book.
You've never had to have an attorney before, right?
No, we've never spoke to an attorney.
So you had no idea what the process was or who to go to?
No.
And then what were you feeling? Did you think this would really go to trial or that someone would ultimately come to their senses and think this case shouldn't go forward?
Well, we kind of figured that, once they started looking into it, that they would realize that this is just a false allegation. That it was just so ridiculous to us that we can't even imagine that, it wouldn't have just gone away. Like once they started looking into it, obviously, when you start talking to people and they're telling you, this isn't even possible, that it would just end.
Was the main reason that you thought that they would come to their senses is because the complainant said this happened approximately 10 years earlier and would happen after school, and Dennis was at work. So there was no way that he could have even been home at the time.
Yeah. Dennis is the sole provider for our family. So I was a stay-at-home mom. I was with my kids all the time. Was my job. It's what I did. And Dennis's hours were kind of not typical. Like he would go in a little later in the morning and he was there late in the evenings. He worked a lot of hours. He loved his job. He was really good at it. And I loved being home with the kids. And
did the complainant, was he ever at your house?
He was at my house a couple times when he was 5. but no more than a handful of times.
Okay.
And that was like for an hour after school. His mom had asked me to watch him once or twice.
And you were there the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
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 So you're talking about, so in the mid-90s, the complainant came over a couple of times when he would have been kindergarten, first grade, roughly that age.
Yes.
And then he makes the allegations approximately 10 years later.
Yes.
So I know, Takura, you worked on this investigation quite a bit. Was there a prompt, do you remember, for why those allegations were made? Did he just come up out of the blue and make those allegations, or through your investigation, was there sort of a precipitating event?
Right. So he told a story to get himself out of a jam. He was caught red-handed, not to be cheesy, but he was stealing from a purse at school. And the instant he made the allegation that Dennis Tomasik had done these things to him, of course, nobody cared about what it is that he'd been caught doing on camera. And, of course, the focus shifted entirely at that point to Dennis and these false allegations.
Which he ultimately admits in the second trial that he made the claim. He still says the claim was true. He didn't admit he lied, but he said he made the claim to get out of trouble, which was...
I believe his words were, I wanted mercy from the law.
Right, which was really astonishing to hear somebody admit from the stand.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was seeing a therapist who was a friend of the family, because initially he claimed he had been assaulted as a child, but didn't come up with a name. And it was only once the family got involved and they started going through did he go over to someone's house as a child? Was it a particular teacher? Whatever was going on. And then he said it was someone from the neighborhood, and then came up with Dennis's name. I mean, is that pretty much how it unfolded?
Yeah, because he got in trouble at the school and he was arrested. Or no, prior to that, he did a suicide. He put a thing on
Zanga
about a suicide.
What's Zanga for those of us who are not, part of the younger generation?
Zanga was an early social media website. I believe it was kind of like people would use it as like a online diary or journal. I never had one, but it was think of Facebook before Facebook.
But you did have a silly name when you were younger, right?
I may have.
Okay, and then people want to know, right? Inquiring minds want to know. So what was your name on social media?
Well, it was AIM, which was the instant messaging. And this was, keep in mind, when I was in middle school, I thought I was really cool and punk. And so mine was XX overdose on a kiss XX.
Who would have known? You clearly did not reveal that to us in your interview. So that's something that you kept from us. But so back to Dennis. So this comes up from this therapist and his parents getting involved, and he makes this claim. And then, if we sort of fast forward, Dennis is charged. Did you provide his original lawyer with information that he could have used to show that Dennis wasn't even home when these assaults supposedly occurred?
Absolutely.
And did he use any of it?
No. He kept telling me, you're thinking inside of the box, which I never really could comprehend what that meant, because I'm giving him things, to prove his innocence. And he's like, well, what good is that going to do? What's that going to do? That's how you prove you're innocent.
Because when was the accuser saying that these incidences happened?
After school.
Mm-hmm. And Dennis wasn't home.
No.
And actually, you were providing much more than just mere information. You gave him tangible items.
Correct.
Receipts and the like.
Correct.
What was Dennis's normal work schedule?
He would go in late morning and then work, into the evening, anywhere from 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. And then...
And did he work so late that when he arrived, there were certain chores that made him famous in the neighborhood?
Yes, he had some nicknames like Nocturnal, and because he would mow his lawn when he got home, and sometimes it was dark, so he would be out there mowing the lawn in the dark. But it had to be done, so and he worked long days. He was tired, so he would I want to get it done before bed because he wasn't going to get up early and do it because he'd be too tired.
Did he have to use flashlights to do it?
He did.
How would he do that, Kim?
Yeah. I heard about it now and then. Like,
Right.
oh, your husband's the one that mows in the dark.
The one that straps flashlights to his mower to mow.
They knew him by that pretty much.
You're lucky you had nice neighbors.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
a guy mowing at midnight
Yes.
does certainly not go over well with a lot of different neighbors.
Yeah.
So Dennis has these allegations against him. You find a lawyer from the phone book. You go to trial. Dennis is convicted. Right. And what was that like for you? And you have 2 kids.
It was like all of a sudden, wham, we went to trial and I'm sitting on my porch and Dennis was convicted. And my world changed. You know, I had 2 kids to feed. I had a mortgage and bills, and he was the sole provider. I didn't have a job, and now I have to get an appeals attorney, and it was like a tidal wave just took us out. Like,
How old? So you had Ethan and Shelby. How old were they when Dennis was convicted?
16 and 13 at the time.
Were they in the courtroom when the verdict came back, or were they in school?
Shelby didn't make 10 minutes in the courtroom because when the prosecutor started talking about her dad, she lost it and came running out of the courtroom. I missed both trials. Like, I had to sit in the hallway for the trial. So people asked me about trial and I'm like, I don't know. I wasn't in there. I was in the hallway because when you're last to testify, you can't be in there until after you've testified. So I missed both trials. But she came out and I did not, we left it up to the kids. It was their decision if they wanted to go in and sit in there. But Shelby just couldn't handle that. They were lying about her father and she had issues with it. So
Did you have to tell them about the verdict? Did you have to go home and tell them that Dennis had been convicted?
Ethan was at the day of that. Shelby did not come to court with us. And Ethan was there. And we had a lot of support. There was a lot of people. And when the verdict came down, I honestly can't tell you. Like, I just remember people were hugging me and kind of guiding me, get up, let's go walking. I was just in shock, I think. Shelby wasn't there. So we ended up back at my house. And when I got there were so many people and so many cars. And
because you had a lot of support.
Oh,
from the
yeah.
neighborhood.
And people were they were like, if this could happen to him, this could happen to any of us. They were just in shock. Like, when the detective came around and they talked to him, they all said, we will, support Dennis. We're going to, be there for him.
Because the detective interviewed all of your neighbors.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And all of them supported Dennis and said,
Yeah.
this is impossible. He didn't do it. The
Right.
complainant's a liar.
Well, and he was never there. So,
Mhm.
By that time, after the trial, a lot of people were there supporting us. So they were all at the house when I got home. But what happened was, when my son had gone to the house to tell Shelby because she was with a neighbor, and she just didn't take it very well. But by the time we got home, the support, by the time I got home, there was already a 10-year-old out doing a can collection for her friend because her friend's family was in trouble and she was going to need money. And that started with a 10-year-old. A 10-year-old child before I even got home.
You had great support from your community.
Oh, absolutely.
You have really great neighbors.
I could have never made it through that 10 years without all of the support. The support was amazing. People I didn't even know. There's so many stories about that. We could talk about that for the next hour.
And not to keep drudging that up, but was it just emotional or financial support as well?
Everything. Financial, emotional. I think I drove my brother-in-law's car more in that 9 years than he did. If it broke, they took it to the shop, they fixed it, they sent it back down. Financially, I would get gift cards, people paying for, like my daughter, I couldn't afford to send her to driver's ed. So other people, my brother-in-law paid for that. I had like my sister's neighbors. I've met them a couple times, but they're like, well, we want to pay a bill for her. So they would pay one of my bills randomly.
People were paying your mortgage at one point too, weren't they? Helping at least?
They gave,
Yeah.
I would get a knock on the door and it would be like a neighbor or a friend, and they'd hand me a card and hug me and, we support you. Is there anything we can do? And that was the big thing. People wanted to help, and they did what they could do. People cleaned my house when I was gone to visit Dennis in prison. I would come home and my house would be clean because I was so busy running, and I needed attorneys and my kid. They would watch over the kids while I was gone. It was just amazing.
Was there ever a time that you felt you just couldn't go on? That you just thought, I don't know that I can get out of bed, right? This is so overwhelming.
Yes, they took good care of me and my kids. There were days where I just, you're on time limits. You have to have an appeal. You have to have lawyers. You have to have. So I had an appeals lawyer, but he became a judge. So then I was without one, but I have to have, a lawyer. I have only so much time these briefs have to be in. So I would wake up and say, I just can't even do this. And one day I was laying in my bed, and I remember my neighbors and my cousin Lisa, and these women I don't even know how, I think there was like 4 women in my room saying, get out of the bed. This isn't going to work. So basically, when I couldn't do it for myself, they would be there doing it, feeding, making sure I ate and getting out of bed and get in the shower and, let's talk about it. Let's walk around the block, breathe, whatever you need to do. We're going to get you through this. So, I had my ups and my downs, and I was just blessed to have that support. I don't think a lot of people probably have that. So,
and there was a wonderful photo that we used in trial, where it's all your community, right? All your neighbors, and tell us about that.
The day Dennis was convicted, like I said, I came home and there were so many people from trial, all the neighbors, friends of people, just, the word went out and it went like a wildfire. And, I was just kind of, like I said, I was in shock. I sat on my porch and I just was thinking, my gosh, what am I going to do? So the next morning, I had said something that evening about, wow, I can't imagine where Dennis is at right now in his head and what he's thinking. So I said, I would love to do some kind of support picture for him so he can see what I'm seeing, because there were so many people, like the whole block was full, cars, people. It was crazy. So the neighbor girls had come down the next morning and said, we're going to do a support picture today. They took my address book, and these girls are in my kitchen, and they were fairly young, just teenagers, and they called everybody in that book, and they had everybody in the neighborhood calling everybody and said, we're going to do support pictures. Get over here. So like a couple hours later, there are all these people in the front yard, and there's cameras, and they're going to take pictures, and they're figuring it all out. And, we couldn't get everybody in. So they backed up a couple trucks, and people were climbing into the beds of the trucks, and people brought their dogs, and they made signs. And
what the signs say?
Dennis, we love you and support you.
I will try to, I believe I can put that photo in the section or the episode notes. So I will try, for our listeners who want to see that, to upload that so you can see how great of a photo that is.
It's such a compelling photo. I mean, it really gives me chills every time I see it still.
Well, it was the start of the fight for justice. And I wasn't alone. And that we would randomly send to him so he wouldn't forget. Time's going by, but listen, we're still out here fighting. Don't give up. We're going to get this. So,
and speaking of people who supported you in the fight for justice for Dennis, could you tell us what the names Chris and Marty Tieber mean to you?
Oh my gosh. Chris and Marty Tieber are the reason that he got the appeal, and they didn't give up. When I had called Marty, he said, well, let me read it. I want to, check it out. And I'm like, good, read it for yourself. Don't take my word for it, And he did. And he called back and he said, wow, are you going to hire me? And I said, absolutely. And it started there.
They fought for 9 years for Dennis.
They did. I ran out of money, and I told him, I said, I will sell my house. I'll sell my house. It's all I have left, because I had taken everything else and spent it on attorneys and defense. It's kind of costly. And Marty said, nope, don't worry about it. He said, I'm not walking away from this until Dennis walks free. And he held to the very end with that, but
Marty and Chris are wonderful.
they're amazing.
Yeah.
And they just did such a great job. And yeah, Chris and Marty are amazing. Amazing men.
It went up and down and up and down. So this is 9 years on a direct appeal.
Yes.
So you would lose at the Court of Appeals, win at the Supreme Court. It would go back for a hearing. Then you'd start that fight all over again, or that process. That must have been incredibly difficult to just hang in there for 9 years.
You know, they're so amazing. I was a lot to handle. I would tell people, I would say, these poor guys, their wives can't be as bad as this. Like, they really, if they don't have gray hair by now, they were wonderful. That when I called, they always called back, and I was on. There was times Marty would say, "Kim, you really shouldn't do that." I'd be like, "Yeah, I know, but I get so many answers, so I'm just gonna keep doing it." But they did not expect to do 9 years of appeals. Even, they would get excited about stuff, and so much time had gone by. I was like, yeah, okay, like I'm not going to get that excited because we got shut down so many times that you get excited, and then I couldn't handle the letdowns anymore. And I at the Supreme Court when we won, Marty was.
Did he call you and tell you?
No, he was there.
Oh
No, he was there, but he was excited about how things went and stuff. And then Chris had called me. Do we want to go into that?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So 9 years later, after the Court of Appeal 4 times, Supreme Court 3 times, we went to the Supreme Court. Chris had argued it. He did a really great job. We went there on December 9th on a Wednesday. 2 weeks to the day, on December 23rd, Chris called me, and he called me at like 10 o'clock in the morning. And he said, "Kim," he said, "we got it. We did it." He said, "We got a new trial." And he was so excited. And he said, "I'm going to try to get him out of there by New Year's and blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Chris, that's so awesome." And we hung up the phone after we talked for, the excitement. And I paced for about 4 hours because it took that long to sink in that this is real. We got it. We finally got it. And then, he didn't get out by New Year's, but and we didn't tell. I paced for about 4 hours, and then I actually texted my son and said, "Can you come to my?" He was working, so I said, "I need you to stop by the house after work. I need to talk to you." And of course, the kids throughout the years came to everything. My son did not miss one hot second of anything, and Shelby too. She came to all of the hearings, and that was their choice. And he came to the house afterward, and Chris had sent me the document that said, the reversal. So I handed Ethan my phone. I hadn't had it printed or anything, so I handed him the phone, and he sat down and he was reading it, and he'd scroll back to the top and he'd read it again. And he's like, "So we got a new trial?" And I was like, "We got a new trial." So yeah, the excitement went from there. And then Shelby came home, and we told her, and yeah, it was a wonderful day. So then we all sat around.
Present.
Yeah.
Oh, what's that?
Is that a great Christmas present for
Oh
you
my
all?
gosh, it was so exciting. But I didn't want to tell Dennis until, we were sure that we could. You never know. Like, I was always so skeptical now at that point.
Well, after 9 years.
Yeah.
Right.
So we said, okay, we're not going to tell him right away, and we'll wait. And then if we don't hear anything, New Year's Day, we went as a family, and then we went New Year's Day to tell him that it's a new year. Life has just changed.
And
you're coming home.
What was Dennis's reaction?
The first thing that he said,
No.
the first thing he said was, "I'm going to get to see my mom." But that didn't happen.
Because she had been very ill, right?
Yeah, she was in her 90s. She had waited the whole time. She fought, and she wasn't doing well towards the end. So he could have seen her, but he didn't actually get out right away. So,
And that's because the judge set an incredibly high bond.
mm-hmm.
And right. And
Yeah.
so, and this is where ultimately we step in. So
Yep.
you tell Dennis, and then he says, I'm going to get to see my mom. And she knew, right? She knew he was going to be coming at some point, be able to get out.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the bond was set so high that he wasn't able to get out right away, and she passed. Is that
Correct. Well, so the first of the year we went and told him. And then it was my understanding that he would be released on the same bond. And, we would go on. And at that point, Chris and Marty were done. They did their job. We got we got the new trial. The appeal's over. We're starting over. And he just sat in prison, and he sat in prison, and nothing was happening. And then I started to inquire a little bit, and I would call the courts, and they said, well, he's going to need a court appointed. I didn't have any money. So I...
That's right. He had a court appointed for a little bit before us, correct?
Yeah.
right?
The judge said, you need to go there and get a paper signed. He's got to sign a paper. Like, I can't do anything until he signs this paper that he wants court appointed. Like, So I literally had to go down, get the paperwork at the courthouse, drive to the prison.
Where was the prison at?
He was in Central Michigan at the time. He'd been in 2 prisons. He started in Saginaw, and he was there for about 4 or 5 years, and then he spent the rest of it in Central Michigan, which was a little closer. So that was a little
Because you
nicer.
guys are over on the west side of the state, so
Correct.
It was a bit of a drive.
Yep. So he actually didn't get out until like March.
I think it was after Easter.
Yeah,
Because
it was months later.
We had the bond reduction motion, I believe, on Good
Yes.
Friday.
Right.
Takura and I went down for that.
Yep.
That's right.
Because Dennis has a court-appointed lawyer for a very brief period of time, and there are so many fantastic court-appointed lawyers, but Marty Tieber, even though he was done, was not really
He was not done.
right?
He did not do this
Right.
for 9 years to
Right.
walk away.
and saw it going down a little bit of the same path just because that lawyer had so much on his plate. So then I get a phone call from Marty, we've been friends for years and years and years. And he says, I need a huge favor from you. They cannot afford you, but I need you to meet with them anyway, because essentially I worked on this for 9 years. He's actually innocent, and I need you and your team to handle this. And that's how we met.
Yes.
That's how I met with you and your big, huge box that you brought with all the papers in
the
it.
first one.
Right, I know. The first of many. And then I hand it over to poor Kim Barrus here, who has to go through and organize it and sift what we need.
Yeah.
And it was a big labor of love on your part, and then ultimately on ours as well.
Well, I hope that Marty explained to you when he called that, she's a little overwhelming. You're
That's okay, because you are allowed, we are allowed. It
Yeah.
works. You know what I mean? Like, you get really into it, we get really into it.
Yeah.
So no issues there.
But also, thank God you had such a
Right.
huge box and file, because a lot of the things that you kept were so helpful.
So important.
Mm-hmm.
well, when you're a victim, I felt, I was a victim.
Mm-hmm.
When you're the victim, it dumbfounded us, and it was taken, all of a sudden the accusation came, we sat around for a year, and boom, my husband's gone. I clung to every little thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was consumed with, I knew the truth, and I was consumed with proving the truth, and I had to figure out how to go about that. And that was, I don't know how to, I knew I was going to do it.
Some of the things that you had were so exciting, I think, as lawyers, because we were able to prove objectively that the complainant's lies, that he was just spreading these falsehoods.
Correct.
Could you tell us about some of the witnesses who ultimately testified at the second one, but weren't called on for whatever reason at the first one?
Oh, well, oh my gosh, there were neighbor kids. There were the adults in the neighborhood. There were people from Dennis's work who were never contacted and talked to at all the first trial. There were...
Was everybody willing?
Well, you guys had to call off witnesses at the end. So I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there was a list of witnesses given to us by Kim that Takura and I called that were probably 50 to 60 names long.
That's right.
And I can't think of a single person who they didn't want to help, like who was against Dennis.
One of my really defining moments that I loved after you guys decided to take on the case, and I brought all my stuff and dumped it on you and said, "Here we go." You guys started to investigate, and you started looking into things, and you guys would call me and say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so amazed." Like, I know Mary had said, wow, we opened that book and that support picture just hit us all like, oh my gosh. But I remember you guys started looking into things, and Takura had called me and he said, well, I've started calling some of these witnesses. And I said, yeah. He goes, I haven't had to ask one of them yet if they would testify. They're all like, so when do I get to testify?
Yep.
Like, he's like, I didn't even get to ask them, will you testify? And they were on board. Like, and that was the thing. People waited so long because they wanted, this was, oh my gosh, finally somebody came to talk to us and we get to help.
And just so some of our listeners know, it is not always that easy to get witnesses to testify.
Right.
We normally are like, please.
Right.
Even in this case, for witnesses who didn't know Dennis. So the witnesses who knew Dennis and worked with him, lived in the neighborhood, the kids, they were all willing. But Takura, was everybody that happy to talk to you?
No.
I love his stories of, you guys all worked so hard for this case. And I'm still, every day I wake up and take a deep breath, and I'm just so grateful and so amazed.
Well, one lady kept telling Takura that he had the wrong number until another one of her friends spilled the beans that no, it was the correct number. And then she was just lying to him. So then he finally just went and wooed her face to face.
That's right.
And then she invited you for a dinner, right?
Christmas,
That's
right? Christmas,
right?
Christmas and
Holiday
everything.
dinner.
Yeah.
Right.
Didn't she hang up on you a few times?
She did.
Oh, yeah.
Tea and scones, ultimately, though, was what she offered. So, hooray, won her over.
And
Yeah.
these were witnesses who had been the complainant's teachers at school and counselors. And so they were very important because there were records that had not been turned over that showed that the complainant had some serious issues and had a habit of lying, and that he would believe his own lies and like to lie to get adults into trouble. So
And this was way before he had said these alleged incidences happened. So I mean, this was like his whole life, pretty much.
For years and years. And so teachers would say they liked the complainant. He was pleasant enough. However, he would tell these elaborate lies and he would truly believe them.
Even when he was caught,
Right.
like red-handed, he would still believe the lie and go with it.
And these were people who didn't know Dennis or your family at all, but we needed to come in and testify to that. And ultimately they did, because Takura just would not let that woman say no in that
Absolutely
situation.
not.
I'm so grateful
Right.
that you, like everybody else, no one was giving up on this. It was like, okay, we are determined. This guy is in communication. And you had sent me, I think, Lizzy, you sent me a witness list or something. And I was like, I don't know these people. So I called and I'm like, who are these people? You had people on the witness list. Once you guys started digging in and doing your thing, you guys did so much work. I mean, the footwork on this was, you put a lot of hours in. And some of them I didn't even know. But we didn't have those names before the first trial. We got those through appeal. That was part of one of the first time the Supreme Court sent back. They sent back the counseling records with those names. So we didn't know who those women were. We were clueless. Like, who are these people? Like, why are they on the witness list? So, yeah.
Well, one of the
That was your
interesting
work.
things that Kim Barrus and I had to figure out was, so the complainant was talking about red bunk beds and trophies and a PlayStation, and how would he even know that these things had existed if he'd never been in Ethan's room? And then what we figured out when we went to your house is the bus stop is right at the end of your driveway. So for years he would be at this bus stop and you could see right into Ethan's room.
Correct.
So
And that is not an exaggeration.
No,
Like,
you
we
could
all have
totally-
stood in there and
I
been
know.
like, oh
We were
my
like,
God.
oh, you could see everything. So we could see, Kim and I took a bunch of pictures because you could see right in the room. So he would be able to describe the room even though he hadn't been in it after those bunk beds had been purchased. And we spoke with a lot of neighbors who said, oh, I can totally describe Ethan's room. And I've never been in there because for years I would wait for the bus at the end of their driveway. So that closed that loop for us where we couldn't figure out how we could make those claims,
Correct.
On the timeline.
And if you look at the photos that Kim Barrus took while she was there, just from the photos standing at the edge of the driveway, you can see right into his room.
Right. It's a good reminder for all of us to close
Exactly.
our blinds. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Blinds are good.
Right.
Well, and at night when the light was on, you could see see the red bunk beds, you could see the trophies, you could see all of that stuff. And as far as like the game, like the PlayStation, that's what like Ethan and his friends they would go back and forth and play the video games or whatever. So
And something that I learned was your home was like the United Nations. Everybody came through and they hung out all hours a day, weekends, and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The kids were always playing basketball out in the driveway, and then the Shelby would be running in and out changing her outfit every hour. So the lights were always on because I would shut them off. She would turn them on.
So for the very few times, the off chances that Dennis would be home during the day, let's say he had a random day off, because if you look at his work records, he would have like 2 days off a month. Where was he when there were kids over at the house? Was he in the house with them?
Dennis is outside most of the time. My kids are outside most of the time. We do a lot of outside stuff. My house is small. TV wasn't really like go outside and play. It's raining. Oh, hey, go run in the rain. Like,
You'll be
Get some of
fine.
that
You'll be
energy out.
fine.
yeah. Well, and they loved it. Like, so, we did a lot of bike riding, and the kids had a lot of outdoor stuff and snowmobiling and motorcycles. And, in fact, the complainant had said that the trophies were for motocross. Ethan never raced motocross. He didn't know. Like, he had no clue that those were for bike racing. So,
And for those trophies, too, you also had, as a proud mom, the magazines where Ethan would be listed in there. And so you can see when Ethan starts racing, which is years after the complainant says these trophies were in the room.
He's listed as a rookie in the magazines.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we had the magazines, the bike receipts, the video game that hadn't even been manufactured yet, bunk beds. We had a lot of tangible evidence, a bunch of photographs that Kim Barrus took.
Measurements.
Right.
Measurements,
Measurements.
yeah.
So there was a lot in the work records. I could not believe how supportive Dennis's old coworkers were, because the place had shut down.
Right.
So they were, it's not like they were all there. I mean, we had to chase these people to the ends of the earth. Literally, in some cases, a guy in Alaska, Colorado, Florida, all over the place. We
they
found him.
testified from the whole country.
Right.
Pretty much.
And Purple Pam.
Oh, shout out to Purple Pam.
That's
She's
right,
awesome.
Purple Pam.
Yeah.
She always wore purple.
And she was such a support. Like, even in prison, these people helped support him. Purple Pam would go out and buy these giant 3-foot cards and have everyone from the plant sign them and send them for his birthday, or just, we're thinking about you. And so she was, there was a lot of support from his work and everyone. So that was helpful for him,
Did you feel differently going into the second trial? Granted, we're all in the room. Right? So you have to say that. Right.
As we stare at you.
I know, right.
No pressure, Kim.
Because they made, between when Dennis's convictions were reversed, the prosecutor made him an offer where if he were to plead no contest, which would mean he wouldn't have to say on the record that he had done something wrong, he literally would be done. No jail, no prison, no probation, no parole. Like, he would be done with this.
Right.
And then he said no. And were you in agreement with that? He said, I'm not admitting to something I didn't do. I'll spend the rest of my life in prison before I do that. Were you in agreement with that decision?
Absolutely.
One of the things I loved is we had heard that you spent every night for the 9 years at home going through documents, and you'd write charts down because the complainant's story dramatically changed. Like, he couldn't keep a straight story. I mean, as I know Takura likes to say, the truth never changes, but lies do. So his story changed so dramatically.
Every time he talked to someone, it was a different story.
Yeah.
From 2 times to 600 times to 10 times to 300 times. I mean, it was just all over the place. And his claims just got more, they just were so inconsistent. And none of that had been brought up at the first trial. And so you charted it all out. And then obviously we go through and we chart it out. But it was nice to see some of your work so we could just build off of that. I mean, it was incredibly helpful for us.
Yeah, there was a lot of notebooks, I'm sure you're reading.
Right.
There were a few.
So, so I'd like to talk about the second trial. So can you give us an idea of what really was different during the second trial compared to the first trial? Can you give us some examples?
Everything. Everything was different. When I came down and met Mary and we talked, you were, really kind of giving me some pointers and saying, this is, what you need. And I knew in the first 3 minutes that I needed you. Like, I wanted to jump over the table and hire you and just hug you and not let you go.
Well, I'm a big hugger, so I would have been fine with that.
And then when, Chris and Marty sent everything to you that they had. And then when you came down and I said, can you come to the house? And you came in and I said, look at everything, go through everything. I don't climb under the beds in the car. I don't care. It made it easier with all the visuals when we're talking. So you know what I'm talking about. So, and you guys took over and it was my second aha, because at first I'm sitting there, Dennis, we got the new trial. Marty and Chris are done. They won. And I'm back to, oh my gosh, I need a lawyer. We're going back to trial. When we got the court appointed, it was just too big of a case. And taking me on is a lot. So his law clerk called me and said, can you come down here and help me? But it was too big of a case. One guy wasn't going to be able to do it. We needed the law firm. We needed, it was a lot of work. You guys have, you guys a lot of hours. So then we hired you guys and that was my second, oh my gosh, relief. I can sleep. You guys took over and you just ran with it. And you did take all of the receipts and the trophies and the PlayStation and the bunk bed. And, you went and talked to all of the witnesses and you investigated this case. You didn't just, you investigated. Lizzy, you guys were such amazing, that I'm calling you at that point saying, who are these witnesses? Because I don't know. So I was so relieved and so happy. And Dennis, of course, was thrilled. But he was scared. It was a very scary thing to go through that second trial. But
the first time that I came to your home, we went on a tour of the neighborhood and you helped take things off paper and breathe life into them. You showed me where you went to bargaining, where the kids went to school, and it was easier to envision, when they're riding bicycles, this is the street. So you helped educate us.
Yeah. Visuals are very important, I think. Because before you actually came and seen my house, you don't know. But then when you come to the house, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a tiny little
You would
house.
hear anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he claimed he was screaming at the top of his lungs. And so we measured. We are, from the bedroom to the kitchen, from the bedroom to the bathroom. I mean, there's no way that you wouldn't hear that. So when he's claiming that Dennis is raping him and that you were home and your kids were home, what he's really claiming is you allowed some young boy to be raped in your house over and over again, 600 times, and you didn't do anything about it. And that has got to be so offensive to you as a human being and a mother. And I mean, I think if you thought a child was being harmed, you wouldn't hesitate to act.
No.
Kim's tough. She would
right.
not just sit back and let that happen. No.
Only over my dead or unconscious body. That is not, I don't even have to know you. You know what? If you're anybody, even anybody screaming, it's your duty to step in and say no. But he basically accused the whole family.
Well, what was also interesting, too, when Kim Barrus and I went to measure is how close your house was to the house next door where there was a childcare facility.
Correct.
So, it was a childcare facility in the home. So if someone is screaming, and we tried it out, poor Kim has to listen to me scream, right? So we tried it out. You could hear it. So kids outside playing would have been able to hear it. The neighbors would have been able to hear it. I mean, those houses were close together.
Right.
So there's just no way that it could have happened. And then Takura interviewed those neighbors, and they said never.
Well, they
Like,
testified.
right.
You know,
Yes.
It was a remarkable trial, I think, in the testimony that the witnesses gave.
But also, the greatest thing about the witnesses, besides their support, just willing to testify, was I don't think there was one person who came to testify that left right after. They stayed throughout the whole thing. As soon as they were allowed to be in the courtroom after testifying, they all stayed just to support him.
It was like a wedding,
Yeah.
right? Our side was full.
Yep.
Right.
Had many more
Yeah.
people than the other side. And I think what was critical also was being able to, when we took the measurements, I remember putting on the demonstration with eBird where I had him tell me, okay, these are the measurements. And we were able to show the jury that one of the rooms that he claimed he was raped in was even smaller than the jury box.
Mhm.
right.
It really puts it into perspective. I think it really helps a jury understand, really how small. If they can't go see the house, it's the best way to show how small your house really was.
Right.
We had asked for them to go see the house, and then the judge denied that. But the other thing is, one of the government's own witnesses who they called, who had played in the neighborhood, he refuted the complainant's testimony about how often they had played. And he said this boy didn't come over to your house to play video games. He went over to his house later on. And that was interesting. We had that group of neighborhood kids who testified that they played with Ethan at the time, but they didn't play with the complainant because he was more of an indoor kid and they were outdoor kids. Then you had the group of adults, then the workers. So it was really, just a whole quilt of people who came in to testify that this could not have happened.
Because the complainant was saying that he was best friends
Right.
with your son.
Oh,
and that
yeah.
he was always over there all the time.
Oh, Takura, tell us about that witness, which was fantastic.
The abridged version is that there was one witness who absolutely could not stand that the complainant accused him of it involved a toy. It made him so upset that the complainant claimed that he threw a toy on the roof. And,
When really it was the complainant.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And
So you got to remember, this is 20 years
He
ago.
was still fuming.
He was still hot about that. And we had to tell him, move on, right?
That's
Because
right.
he was an older kid too in the
Right.
group. So he's like in his 30s now. he was
Yeah.
getting that story in there.
I know about this toy. So it was hilarious.
But I think that the complainant was kind of known for that. That was the thing. He got in trouble a lot, and he made false accusations, and that's when we got those counseling records, that's pretty much kind of what it talked about in there. So
He was troubled and needed help. And what was so troubling for us is we spoke to the prosecutor and said, he needs help. This is not helping him at
Right.
all. Like, he has some serious issues, and you should be trying to help him and encourage him to get help, as opposed to just sort of continuing on with this.
Feeding into the fantasy.
Right.
well, they were enabling that
Mhm.
the false accusations, and that doesn't help him.
And something else that we learned during the second trial, and I don't think we knew this before, was that counselor was actually much more than that.
Mhm.
And it turns out that she rented a home for the complainant and her son, and all sorts of inappropriate relationships, I think, led
Mhm.
to this accusation.
Well, she, I believe, testified that she knew he was a victim before he claimed to be a
Yes.
victim.
He had all the
Victim.
signs.
Yep. And she was inviting him to say he was a victim. Well, then he got caught stealing.
Mhm.
He was arrested. And, that's when he said, I need to go and talk to her right away. And then he claimed to be a victim.
And
so.
he had met with many different counselors and therapists over the years
8?
throughout his whole life and had never once made this accusation until he got in trouble legally this time with the law. And then, she opened up the door saying, essentially, why do you act out? Did something happen to you?
And
Right.
he walked through that door.
Yep, immediately.
Yeah.
And sent Dennis through another door for 9 years.
Mhm.
Right. Prison for 9 years.
Yeah.
So this didn't just impact Dennis, and this just did not impact you.
No.
So we talked a lot about Ethan. Did Ethan have plans after high school to go to college?
Yes.
And he was a National Honor Society member, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
then did he go to college?
He had a couple of scholarships. One was a full ride to Kettering, which is
Wonderful school.
they were both in the top 5, I believe. I think Purdue had given Purdue somewhere down south had given him a scholarship, but he knew at that point that he didn't want to leave us behind to go. He gave up the scholarships because he felt responsible. He felt like he needed to stay home and, protect me and his sister. And, he had to be the man. He lost his childhood. He lost his college education that he worked so hard for. That was his goal. His whole life was, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to become something.
He wanted to be an engineer, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he stayed behind, and he said, my dad can't come to me, so I need to be there to go to him. So.
And he ultimately ended up doing the same thing that Dennis does.
And Dennis was his hero. So that,
Yep.
There was a really sweet class project that Ethan had done when he was younger, where he talked about who his hero was. And Dennis, he picked Dennis and all the reasons why.
Yeah.
And that came out at the second trial too.
Yeah.
And that was another time where Dennis cried.
My favorite part of that is where he said, my dad is my hero because he's good at math.
Which
I thought was so adorable.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the other things that you had told us was while Dennis was in prison, you tried to keep life as normal as possible for Ethan and Shelby. And so when Dennis could call around dinner time, you would put him on speakerphone and you would have dinner as a family, you, Ethan, and Shelby around your kitchen table, Dennis obviously calling from Michigan Department of Corrections, but you would talk about, try and keep it as normal as possible, talk about school and life and all of that.
Right. When he went into prison, that was the thing. I said, the next day or within a few days, I said, okay, this is how this is going to go. I'm going to take care of your dad and work on his, getting him out of prison. And you guys are to continue to go to school, do your best, get good grades, and, just do the best you can and focus on your world. I didn't want them to take that burden on. I knew Ethan would. The neighbors knew Ethan would. There was a letter to the judge saying, this child he's gonna step up and try to fit his dad's, step into his dad's shoes. And they did a really good job. I remember Ethan said, come on, Shelby, let's go outside and play basketball. So like the very end of that week that trial ended and Dennis went to prison, Ethan and Shell went outside and they were playing basketball. And I remember, I went to check on him and look outside, and there were all the neighborhood kids that didn't get to testify playing in the driveway like always. The only thing is later in the evenings they didn't get to play outside because Dennis wasn't out there. So, but
because a complainant was still in the neighborhood, and
Yes.
it did cause some issues,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
yes,
and Ed threatened Shelby at one point, and there were
Yes.
some issues.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why Ethan stayed behind. He was not going to. His dad was in prison, and
He was protecting you and Shelby.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things, too, that listeners might want to know is, was Dennis your first boyfriend?
Aw.
So this isn't just someone you met in your 20s. When did the two of you first
this
meet?
poor guy. The guys in my world. I met Dennis. I moved in down the street from him when I was 7. So, and he was the cool dude with the motorcycle.
At 7?
Yeah,
What?
he had a mini bike. He had a Lizzy
Okay.
Cary.
I am not surprised
Well,
at
we need
all.
to clarify. It's not a motorcycle, right?
A mini bike.
Okay.
7-year-old
Yeah.
time in a Harley.
So we met when I was 7. My sister was a big tomboy, so they became really good friends. So he was at our house. My mom, we were like the old Kool-Aid commercial. There were always kids. If someone couldn't find their kid, they'd call my mom. mom? Hey, where's my kid? Oh, Johnny's down at so-and-so's. She knew where everybody's kids were because she was home. But so, yeah, we met when we were 7 and we started dating at 16 and yeah, I used to beat him up all the time. Back, I thought, he's a keeper, right?
We'll defend you.
Yeah.
Was he your first kiss?
Yeah.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
So
So we've been married 30 years, but we've actually been together like 40.
long time, yeah.
So,
Oh.
yeah.
So back to the second trial. Mary, how long did it take for the jury to come back with a verdict?
19 minutes. And the only reason it took that long, they told us, was because they had to use the bathroom. So when we closed, so the prosecutor goes first, then I go. During my closing, some of the jurors were crying because they knew that Dennis had been wrongfully imprisoned for an extended period of time. So it was really hitting them. You know, he comes from and is the husband in such a wonderful family. So then the prosecutor they get to speak again, and then the jury goes back and deliberates. Well, we weren't even done packing things up. So
Lizzy almost missed it altogether.
Right.
It was the worst moment of my life. So I was the trial paralegal. So I was the one who was there with them actually in trial. And once the jury went back, I was like, we need snacks. It has been a long day. We haven't had lunch. We need snacks. So
you had a toddler with you, right?
I know, that's right. And that's
Takura.
Who's always hungry. Always hungry.
So our firm administrator, Tony, had came for the day because he wanted to be there in support. So him and I go down to the basement floor where there's a little like cafe to get some snacks and water. And I have my phone in my pocket on vibrate, so I'm not paying attention to it, not seeing that Takura has texted me multiple times that we have a verdict. So Tony and I come back upstairs and turn the corner around from the elevators, and no one's in the hallway. So I immediately throw my snacks in the air and run into the courtroom. And I made it just in time. I wasn't able to be back at the table with them, but there was one seat left open on Dennis's side. All the rest of the seats were completely taken. So I sat on Tony's lap.
You're very close.
We're very close. We're very good friends. And waited for the jury to read the verdict, which was like 2 seconds later.
Well, when we heard the buzzer, so, you'll hear the buzzer, and we thought, well, they want the exhibits because they hadn't taken them. So then the clerk comes out, and so I said, oh, they want the exhibits? And she said, no, they have a verdict. So I remember getting all of you, Dennis, Takura and I went out to bring you all in, and Kim, you said, what does this mean? And then I said, I don't know. We'll find out, and we'll fight and stand with him till the end. Because we'll never stop fighting.
Is this normal for it to only be that long? Yeah.
No. Especially
How long
that's why we're all like
trial was 2 weeks. So I've had a shorter verdict in a 1-day trial, 13-minute not guilty, but not in a case that went on for 2 full weeks we had dozens and dozens of witnesses and numerous exhibits. On something like this, we really expected them to be out longer. I mean, we thought we had proven the case, but you just never know with a jury. And then they came out, and when they came out, one of the jurors winked at me. So I thought, I think that's a good sign because I don't think he was interested in dating me. And so, I'm definitely significantly older than he is. So I thought, well, that's a good sign. And then they read the verdict, and then Dennis just sobbed. Everybody sobbed.
Dennis just dropped.
He fell to his knees.
Yeah.
Right.
He fell to his knees.
We sobbed at the office.
What was that
I know.
like for you, Kim?
I'd went out and I talked to a couple people, and I'd gone into the restroom, and all of a sudden my daughter-in-law comes running in, and she's like, Kim, are you in here? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, they got a verdict. And I'm like, what? What? So soon? It was a little scary because, wow, I missed the whole trial. We went in, and I think I was hyperventilating. And, they said not guilty. And I don't remember a whole lot after that, other than you turning around, Mary, and you came over and hugged me. And then I think you, Takura, you and Lizzy were holding Dennis up or something,
That's right.
hugging him and holding him.
And I sat down. I couldn't even stand up, and everybody was standing, and everybody was so excited. And I don't even remember the second.
I sobbed. On Tony's lap, I sobbed.
Yeah, everybody was.
Yeah.
It was just such a joyful moment. It's what we fought for all that time. So it was just amazing.
Well, we all wound up getting sick. So I don't think people realize for trials you have so little sleep. And even when you do get sleep, it's not that deep, restful sleep because you're thinking, okay, tomorrow is this and we've got these witnesses. So I think that starting the next day, we all got colds. But that night we went out, had a nice dinner and some nice wine. And that was it was just a great
It's one of my favorite memories.
I know.
Us going to dinner to celebrate.
Would you say that based on the number of witnesses that the defense put on the stand, as well as the amount of evidence, that it was almost a reversal of how these types of cases proceed?
Sure. We put on far more witnesses. I don't think they had one exhibit. We had dozens of exhibits that went in, photographs, receipts,
summaries.
Summaries, right. We took all of his work records and Lizzy and Kim went and put them on summary calendars so it would be easier for the jury to see. So we put on our side of the proofs lasted far longer than the government side. We probably called 5 times as many witnesses, I think.
Yes.
When we went back, so after the verdict was read and everyone kind of settled down, we were able to go back and meet the jurors and talk to them. And what was their reaction?
So they said they took one vote. So they used the bathroom, then they took one vote and they had a little styrofoam cup and they showed us. So they all went around, they wrote on a sheet of paper what they believed the verdict should be, put it in this styrofoam cup, and the jury foreperson took it out, read it, and that's how they reached their decision. I mean, they were all 100% convinced that he was innocent. And I got that night a fantastic email from a juror that probably is one of the most kindest emails I've ever read, where he wrote at length about he never would have left the jury room. He knew that Dennis was innocent. He was so sorry for what had happened to your family and hoped that you would find peace. And it was just a really lovely note. And I think that it was very important for all of us to show not just that Dennis was not guilty, that the government didn't meet their burden, but actually that those jurors believed he was innocent. And we didn't shift the burden. We still would have gotten the not guilty. I would have been thrilled with that, even if they thought the government didn't meet their burden of proof. But it was so important, I know, to Dennis and to you to really hit home that he was innocent.
Right.
And that's why we pushed so hard putting on so many witnesses.
Yeah. And when we went back there, Takura went around and shook every juror's hand.
But
we hugged. Yes. Some of them gave us hugs and said, we absolutely knew that he was innocent. It wasn't just that one email you got. Right. All of them just kept saying over and over again, they felt so bad that you and your family had to go through this. And it was clear that he was innocent. Everyone believed that.
Well, it was interesting. So when the jury went back to deliberate, so they were out for that 19 minutes. So I always go over and shake the hand of the prosecutor. It's just something that you do. Like even in sports, right? You'll always shake the hand of your opponent. And I, just shook his hand and then started to go back to our table. Well, the detective said, if his first lawyer had done his job, he never would have been convicted and we never would have been here. And I did bite my tongue because I wanted to say, if you had done your job, because you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes. When someone is saying this happened after school and Dennis says, well, I was at work, I think the first thing that the detective should have done is go to his workplace, because if Dennis had been lying, she would have gutted that alibi right then and there, right? So he's not at work. What's he talking about? He was fired 3 years ago. So she would have known right then and there whether Dennis was telling the truth or not. She didn't do that. And if she had done that, I think she would have been able to go back to the complainant and his family and really dig deeper and learn that this is a troubled teenager and not someone who was assaulted by Dennis. And she didn't. And having to recreate that 20 years later where the plant had shut down, these witnesses are scattered all over the country. It was so much more difficult than if she had done her job when this first happened.
From the get-go.
Right. So it was, and what's astonishing too is, has Dennis received a penny from the Wrongful Imprisonment Compensation Act, Kim?
No.
Right. The Attorney General's office is fighting us tooth and nail. So we teamed up with the Tebers to try and get Dennis some compensation for spending 9 years in prison. He's listed on the National Registry of Exonerations, and that details the problems with the case. And numerous problems, the flawed evidence, the flawed testimony from the complainant, and we keep getting turned down every step of the way, which is so distressing. Right now it's at the Michigan Supreme Court, so hopefully we'll have some good news for you soon. People think, why would someone lie? So that's, I think, the thought process, especially now. We hear this all the time. If someone makes a claim, you have to believe them. But that's not the way the justice system works. That parents may want to be supportive, a school system, a therapist, but that's not the way the justice system works. We see so many people who are wrongfully accused for numerous reasons. Right. This one, I agree with you. He's lucky he was married and he was at work. Suppose he was home, but he was just, watching television. It would have been a very different case if your kids weren't so outdoorsy. Right. They were more introverted. There are so many different aspects of this case that others don't have to try and defend themselves.
Exactly.
But the financial toll of keeping someone in prison for 9 years, that's over $250,000 that the state paid for that. And then the toll on your family, financially, emotionally, the stability wise, it is, I think it rocks everyone's world when you think if Dennis could be convicted and it takes 9 years to release him from prison and then another almost 2 years for us to get to trial and exonerate him, is anyone really safe?
Well, and that was the thing, because we knew a lot of people. We had preschool or teachers who retired because they're like, if this could happen to him, he's never home. This could happen to me. And so people were resigning from jobs. We had people who were volunteering at the church for preschool saying, I'm not doing that now, just in fear of this could happen to me. And to be so close to that and know that, somebody's innocent and now they're in prison for a crime they didn't commit. Yeah, it affects so many people. It just trickles out so far.
One thing I want to ask, which I don't think we talked about, just so people understand, I guess, the emotion that occurred once Dennis was released out on bond. What happened when you went to pick Dennis up?
Oh my gosh. Well, we went and picked him up and, he said, what do you want to do? I got to go to Taco Boy because Taco Boy's, we've been going there forever. That's a little hole in the wall. So we go to Taco Boy, we eat, and then we came driving through the neighborhood and the word was out because they'd already got online and knew he'd been released. So they knew, they were waiting. They were watching the house. And so we're driving through the neighborhood and people are in their yards and the neighbors are out there. They're screaming. They knew he was in the car. We couldn't even get in the driveway. And all of a sudden there are hundreds of people. Like my house, people are bringing their dogs. The dogs missed him, and they're great. Now they've got, all these kids were teens. Now they're early 20s. They've got their own kids. So everybody comes and they're all bringing their kids. And for me, it was so overwhelming. I had to go in my room. I was just like, oh my God, my house was full of people. People were ordering pizzas and it was finally I went to bed at like midnight. I said, okay, party, go ahead, people. I was so exhausted. I went to bed, but Dennis got to visit with all of these people and it was just, it was quite the celebration.
Well, so we got, and I don't know that we've ever shared this with you, but after the verdict, once that went around your neighborhood and your support system, we got a lot of emails thanking us for our work. And we had
Facebook messages.
Facebook messages, all that. Right. People just wrote the nicest emails and contacted us. And it was just really heartwarming for us to know you had that support. And it was really a lot of gratitude and we appreciated getting it.
I think for me, one of the things that stands out also is that he did not want Shelby, after her first experience at MDOC, to return. And I'll never forget what it is he said when he saw her again after so long.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what he said when he saw Shelby again?
Well, first of all, it was hard to get them there because you have to get the birth certificates to prove it's his kids and stuff. So we did go a couple times and then there was an incident in the visiting room and he would always call after we left and he was put back out into, population or whatever, and make sure that we got on the road and we were on our way because it was a long drive. And he called and said, she's never going to see me again if I don't get out of here. You guys are not allowed to come back. And he didn't let us come back to visit him, even me. He's like, it's just, I'm here. I'm going to endure this. There's no reason that you all need to be here. That's just crazy. So Ethan and Sarah had purchased their home. So Ethan took a bunch of pictures of the house because, they'd talk and he would tell him. And he's like, oh, send me some pictures. So we didn't do pictures of like us, but he wanted pictures of the house and stuff. So in that, I had put a Christmas picture of my dad with all the kids, all the grandkids. And he had gotten those photos and he went through them and that photo would come up and he called me and he said, now by this time, Shelby and Ethan are 5-6 years older. So you're talking 13, 14 to 19, 20. So she's now a young woman. She's not a little girl anymore. And he called and he said, who's the blonde? And I said, that's your daughter. He didn't even recognize her. And he just said, I'll call you back. And he hung up. And then he called me a few hours later. But he didn't even recognize his own daughter. And that was so sad. So when we found out that he was going to be getting out and we went for New Year's, she went. So that was the first time that he had seen her, in the 9 years. So, I mean, that's a long time. He missed her whole teenage life, boyfriends, girlfriend. There were so many milestones that he didn't get. He never saw her in a prom dress. He never got to, meet the boyfriends and the girlfriends and
Graduation.
teaching her to drive, graduation.
Yep.
So much.
And all the day-to-day, that is just part of being a family. Just the driving to the store, going for ice cream.
Right.
You two are, and all your family, you're big into going,
right,
riding bikes and water and all of that.
Yeah, so when Shelby would want to go ride her motorcycle or a mini bike or snowmobiling, whatever, and it broke, then Ethan would have to pick up those pieces. And thank goodness he followed in Dad's footsteps and could
fix anything.
Fix things.
So what's life like now? So is it just the four of you still? Well, and then with your daughter-in-law?
Life is good. Life is so good. Ethan and Sarah are married and now they have a little guy. So I spend a lot of time with him and we're just so enjoying life. He gets to come and hang out with us and, we had him for the weekend. So it was.
And is the family continuing to grow?
Yeah, we have a granddaughter. We're very excited to be coming into the world in a couple months here. So it's very exciting. Yeah, our family's growing and happy and, little bicycles and mini bikes and motorcycles. We're going to start all over again and keep going.
You sent you sent all of us a photo of you and your new grandson and Dennis. And man, this makes me sound like I'm just like a sobber all the time, but I'm just always crying.
No,
but I
true.
cry. Yeah, well, that is true. But I mean, I just started crying when you sent that to me because it was so wonderful because Dennis missed so much.
Yeah.
And for him to be home with you now and be able to enjoy his first grandchild is just, it's heartwarming. It just pulls on your heartstrings.
When they had the baby and they called, I was walking up the driveway. I was talking to the neighbor when Ethan had called, and I walked up the driveway, and Dennis knew. He could tell by my face because I was so excited. And he said, I'm just so happy that I'm not going to miss this.
Yeah.
Let's get ready and go down there and see this baby. So we've done some camping and we've been to the dunes and
awesome.
We're out doing, just having fun stuff.
Good.
So yeah, we're living on.
For any listener who is in a similar situation to yours, they have a loved one in prison and they know the person is innocent. Do you have any advice for them or words of wisdom based on your own experience?
Don't give up because the truth will come out. The truth will come. It's time consuming and the system isn't very fast. They're slow. But don't give up. It'll come around. It'll come around. Don't give up. Keep fighting. Keep calling. Keep doing whatever you have to do to get out there and let, just prove the truth.
Well, you're one of those good people who kept fighting for 9 years for Dennis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he would not be home
Nope.
with his new grandchild and you and his kids and loving and enjoying life if it weren't for you.
Absolutely.
And
I didn't do it alone, so yeah.
if I were his wife, I'd remind him of that all the time. I'd be like, I'm not doing the laundry. You get down there. You're home because of me.
He's Mr. I used to say he's my garbage man. He's my electrician. He's my plumber. He's my carpenter. He's my mechanic.
Well, he is our car guy too.
Yeah.
So I've called him with a question or two myself since then. So.
He's helped me with questions about putting in my privacy fence.
I
So
know.
he really is the go-to for everyone.
I could have never done this alone. I just, with the grace of God and, just good people, and that was the thing. I remember Marty was saying we just need people to look at this, because once they look at it, it's so obvious. How could they walk away?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I needed. I needed somebody to look at this and say, oh my gosh. And that's exactly what Marty and Chris Tieber did. And then they ran with it. The words thank you are not even, how do you express, the gratitude? You didn't have to do it, but you did. Marty and Chris, they didn't have to do it. They could have walked away. I had lawyers say, well, when your money's gone, then too bad. I'm not pro bonoing this. So, you guys didn't do that.
Teamwork made the dream work.
Mhm,
did.
absolutely.
Well, I am now living the dream. Thank you so much. Life is good. We're enjoying ourselves.
And thank you for joining us. We absolutely adore you and Dennis and your entire family. And I think your story of how you fought for Dennis for 9 years to get him released, then the 2 years until we were able to exonerate him, is inspiring. I know it inspires me every day.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
So that is it for today. Thank you so much, Kim, for joining us. As you know, we love you.
Absolutely. Anytime.
So
we
we
love you too.
So we're very happy that we were able to get your story out. So I guess that is it for today. Thank you for listening, and keep an eye out for our next episode.